Welcome everyone. Today we're tackling one of the most deceptively tricky skills in clinical microbiology, interpreting bacterial culture results. A culture report looks authoritative, organism names, colony counts, sensitivity panels, but that printout is full of traps that lead clinicians toward misdiagnosis, overtreatment, or plain confusion. Over the next 12 minutes or so, we'll walk through the most common pitfalls, confusing contaminants with pathogens, overreading mixed growth, and ignoring sample quality, and build the habit of always asking, does this result actually match my patient? By the end, you should be able to look at a culture report and interpret it like a clinician, not just read it like a lab printout. Start with the single most important idea. A culture is a tool, not a diagnosis. What a culture actually does is detect growth. It tells you that organisms were present in the sample and multiplied on the plate. That's all it proves. It does not prove causation. Bacteria growing in a dish is not the same thing as bacteria causing disease in your patient. The only way to bridge that gap is clinical correlation. Do the organism, the site, and the quantity match the clinical signs in front of you? If a result doesn't fit the patient, trust the patient and question the sample or the interpretation before you start treating a piece of paper. Everything that grows is clinically relevant. Plates are routinely populated by organisms that have nothing to do with disease. Skin flora, staph species, for example, hitch a ride during collection and are among the most common contaminants. Environmental organisms from the air, surfaces, or collection equipment can appear the same way. And then there are opportunists, organisms that may be harmless commensals in one context, but genuine pathogens in another, depending on the site and the patient's immune status. The skill here is distinguishing a true pathogen from background noise. Look at whether the organism fits the site, whether it's the dominant growth, and whether it makes clinical sense. Cultures throw a lot of students. When you see 3 or 4 organisms on one report, the instinct is to assume a severe polymicrobial infection. But in many sample types, mixed growth is completely normal. Wounds are routinely colonized by multiple organisms. Free catch urine frequently picks up mixed flora from the distal urethra and environment. Mixed growth often signals contamination or normal colonization, rather than true infection. Interpretation requires context, the collection method, the site, the quantity of each organism, and the clinical picture. A mixed result from a cystocentesis sample means something very different from a mixed result from a free catch sample. Everything we've discussed depends on one thing you control before the plate is ever streaked: sample quality. Garbage in, garbage out. Collection technique matters enormously. A cystocentesis sample is far more reliable than a free catch, and a properly prepped skin site reduces contaminants. Transport matters. Delays, the wrong media, or temperature swings let contaminants overgrow and let fragile pathogens die. And timing matters. Culturing after antibiotics have started can suppress the very organism you're hunting, giving you a falsely negative or misleading result. If you want trustworthy interpretation, you have to earn it at the point of collection. It isn't free and it isn't always necessary, so when should you actually do it? The guiding principle is simple. Culture when the result will change your management. Recurrent infections, where empirical therapy keeps failing and you need to know what you're really dealing with. Severe infections, where getting it wrong is costly. Non-responsive cases, where the patient isn't improving as expected. And before committing to long-term antibiotics, where you don't want to base weeks of therapy on a guess. If a culture won't change what you do, ask whether it's worth doing it at all. Let's bring it together. 3 things to carry with you out of this talk. First, culture does not equal infection. Growth on a plate is data, not a diagnosis. Second, interpretation requires clinical correlation. The result only has meaning next to the patient in front of you. And third, sample quality is everything. The best lab in the world can't rescue a poorly collected sample. Culture interpretation really is an art as much as a science, And context is everything. Treat every report as a question to be answered, not an answer to be obeyed. Thank you for joining. Please like if this helped, and I'll see you next time.